Have you got any concerns about that, just to stay on this the topic of Sydney at the moment?
No, I don't. I think the fact that you can see that contact tracers are working proficiently and efficiently through this just goes to show that we've learnt so much since the start of COVID-19. The states are now acting swiftly to make sure they trace, they lock down, and that's how we should do it. We shouldn't go back to arbitrary lines on a map put there 120 years ago. We should back one another. We back the nation to keep ourselves safe, and doing that with contact tracing, isolation, and eventually a vaccine. So, I have confidence. New South Wales is one of the best contact tracing methods in the country, and I think everyone just needs to cool their jets and make sure that we continue to stick to that process rather than reverting back to old-type parochial lines on a map that just work for political reasons rather than for common sense.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll be relieved that Queensland's not going to change its position at the moment, but WA has suggested, as you just heard there, that it may well look to delay its reopening with New South Wales, as you just heard from Brad Hazzard too. He says that WA's got to get real. Do you think that would be acceptable if they did delay it because of this new case?
No, I don't. And the only reason it's changed in Queensland is the election's done and dusted, because that was all Anastasia Palaszczuk was telling Queenslanders, we're keeping you safe. It's funny now she's not rolling out Jeanette Young. She's got a health minister saying it's okay. So it was all care and no responsibility before. But with respect to WA, I get that it works. They've got a state election coming up. Parochial borderlines are politically popular at the moment, but Mark McGowan needs to do what's right for the country. He's part of Australia. Western Australia needs to understand that we have an economy that relies on one another, but we can also keep one another safe by trusting one another. And New South Wales has proved that. I think they've proven themselves beyond doubt with respect to contact tracing, getting on top of these, localising the lockdowns and making sure that there's confidence to everybody about how we do it. And that should be the formula we move on with.
Just onto this report, Minister, by the McKell Institute that's been published in The Australian today. It's found fruit pickers in Coffs Harbour are getting paid as little as $3 an hour. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's unacceptable, and what needs to happen is those small minority that bend the rules and cut corners and exploit people need to be weeded out. And in fact, John Azaris was tasked with the responsibility of giving me a report around this, and in fact we're now acting with some legislation. Christian Porter's in fact some way through that legislation around labour hire companies and putting in some real stronger regulations and trying to get the states to come with us, because you've got to understand that we need the states to mirror that legislation one by one. So I think this isn't just pointing fingers at state and federal. We have to work together to make sure that we get effective regulation over this, because it actually destroys the reputation of agricultural work, and that's not what we want. The vast majority do the right thing. But in any industry, whether it's agriculture or anything, there are always people who cut the corner that do the wrong things, that unfortunately give us a bad reputation. So we need to make sure that we weed them out quickly. There's punitive penalties for these people that do the wrong thing, and we remove them entirely from the industry.
$3 an hour, I mean, is that slave labour?
It's disgraceful. There's no other way you can sugarcoat it. That is disgraceful, and that is exploitation. So, you'd have to look at the individual cases, and I would hope that there is mechanisms now that the state authorities are working through with these individuals and looking at these cases and prosecuting. But again, we need to strengthen this. We need to harmonise this across the country, and I think that there is momentum towards that. Christian Porter and the other law officers around the country, I think, are working collaboratively on this to finalise this once and for all.
The Australian Workers Union wants a royal commission into fruit picking conditions. Is that something that you would support?
Oh, look, you never say never to a royal commission, but I think you need to work through these issues calmly and make sure that you use common sense about how you can address it. You can address it with legislation, and if you can do that quickly, then why go through the torture of a long, protracted royal commission when you could, in fact, rectify this with legislation, and particularly if it's harmonised across the country. That would be a far stronger leadership way in which to deal with this.
You would have noticed the surging price of iron ore in the last couple of days, Minister. Is this an example of how China needs us as much as we need them?
Well, we need one another, And that's what we need to continue to work towards, and ensuring that we continue to make it clear to China that dialogue is always available. Our door is always open, our phone is always on. And we will continue to have our hand out ready to start that dialogue. That is the best way in which to address grievances, and that is what we will continue to do. So it's important that we all understand that trade benefits both nations, and we'll continue to try and enrich that trade, but we'll also look to diversify for our producers. We've got 14 free trade agreements, including China, and countless market access for commodities around the world, and we'll continue to try and enrich that and expand that. In fact, we're looking to trade agreements with the UK and EU now as we speak, and we'll continue to work through that process. But the best way to address any issues is through dialogue.
But that's happening from your way. You can't get China to pick up the phone at the moment, so the problem's on their side.
Well, we won't turn our back and stop that process, because then we're no better than anyone else. We have to show leadership here. We have to continue to demonstrate that we are ready to start that process, to have that dialogue, to work through the issues, and to continue on with trade that's beneficial to both of us. That's leadership, and that's what this government has been consistent about. We'll be patient, we'll be there, we'll be consistent, and we will continue to make sure that when China's ready to speak, we're ready to listen.
So you'll hold the line?
We will. You never compromise on your values or principles as a nation. Your sovereignty is precious to this country. In fact, hundreds of thousands of Australians have lost their lives protecting it. We now need to be fierce custodians of their legacy, and we will. And we would expect that of any nation. Their sovereignty is their right, and we will respect that, but our sovereignty needs to be respected in return.